Hello, Cameron. How are you?
Hello, Astra. I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for coming on such a short notice. We literally talked like a few days ago.
Yeah, of course.
um, but when I was looking at your social media, more like Instagram, one thing that stood out to me was your like transformational journey. Pretty much like how long has it been? Like 18 months, I think you said, since you
hmm
pretty much like started to change, make like drastic changes in your life. Maybe you can tell more about how that started and where did your journey lead you to?
Yeah, it would have been May of 2021. Yeah. So essentially, you know, I had been um just kind of on that spiral downhill after life happens and you just start, feeling like you're at the bottom. They talk about rock bottom.
Yeah.
Well, that was, kind of the point I was at.
How would you
And
describe it like emotionally, the rock bottom? How does it look or feel?
just you feel like you're not where you should be. You feel like you're letting absolutely everybody down. Like even if you put on this persona that you're winning and feeling better, because when you're succumb to addiction, like one of your biggest goals and things you set out to do during the day is to hide it primarily, right?
Yeah.
So you put on this personification to everybody else that you're doing just fine, everything's fine. But I think the people close to you ultimately know like it's not actually fine.
Yeah.
um so eventually all this starts to build up and kind of start backfiring a little bit on you, and you kind of look at yourself, and you're like, okay, I have two options really. Either I face the truth and turn around and fix this, or I I'm eventually going to die. So looking into myself and realizing, I was really just a shell of who I knew I could be. I was very, very like skinny, small, a lot of dystrophy as far as like my muscular system. Because I grew up being, athletic, active, always prided myself on that stuff. And I couldn't do half of the things that I would have liked to do at that time. I was still, just 30 years old at the time. So it's like, not that old yet. I can still
Yeah.
go out there and do a lot of stuff. So, um, basically at the pivotal moment where I went in to get help, um, or go into the hospital, I should say, I had some swelling in my throat and ended up having troubles, kind of restricted breathing. And I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to use this to go in, tell the doctor like I've got a drinking problem. I need help, because I knew that they would be able to give me some sort of um, prescription or some medication,
Yeah.
to um, defend against the withdrawals, because that's ultimately what I was nervous about. Alcohol withdrawals are absolutely brutal, and they, one of the few withdrawal things you can withdraw from that can actually kill you, without treatment. So um,
And how long
made
did
that
you
decision.
did you have that addiction before you had that withdrawal? How long was that period?
So like, how long was I addicted to
Yeah.
alcohol? Uh, Years. I mean, I started drinking like at 14, casually partying with my
Yeah.
friends. We're from a small town. There's not a whole lot to do. Um, but then it periodically through college, partying. Then after college, some things went awry, I guess, in college, and then got married, and then moved back to my hometown. It was just small town life. There's always something that you know Tuesday night, something was going on. We'd play cards or bowling or
Yeah.
golf or something. It's like, okay, well, I'll have a drink. I'll have a drink here, So it just progressively led to it every single day. And then eventually it turned into literally waking up in the morning. And the first thing I would do is like brush my teeth, get a drink, have a shower beer, drink on my way to work, and then drink all day throughout work. So it gets to this point in addiction where you're literally like, you have to pre-plan ahead so that you always have this drink somewhere, right? Otherwise you'll start hitting those withdrawal symptoms. Um,
And
so
did you like
say,
fully cut it after these years?
yeah,
Man,
so
that must have been
uh
hard.
yeah, so that's why, I mean, going cold turkey for people like with alcohol specifically can be very, very difficult and actually life threatening. You know, there's other opioids and drugs you can quit cold turkey and
Yeah.
the withdrawals will suck, but they're ultimately not going to kill you. So I went to the doctor basically, you know, to get, so basically like a 2-week prescription of it. It's called Ativan.
Mhm.
Um, because when I went to the doctor, my withdrawals started so quickly when I was getting into the hospital bed, like the mix of anxiety and the withdrawals. I actually started like convulsing. I was starting to shake until they got some Ativan into my system to where I'd calm down, feel normal. Um, but then it was about a 2-week prescription after that, and then just it was cut off. I made the decision. I didn't go to rehab, anything like that. It was just like, okay, this is not something I need in my life. I never think about it anymore. And ultimately, that decision led to other decisions, which compound effect led me to where I am now.
So with that decision, because I think that many times when it comes to change or like, I don't say like big change, but technically it is a big change. Really huge part is played by that decision, because that's something that I hear a lot is I really want to change. I really do. And not even, yeah, they want to change and sometimes even say, I'm ready to do anything. I literally like, I want to do anything that I need to do. But then when it comes to actually doing it, that's where either they don't, or addiction takes over, or it actually clouds your judgment or decision making, because it's not an easy thing to just stop, especially if you have done it for years. You know, it literally becomes like part of you, or your body is now adapted where it literally craves it. So with that decision, what helped you to first make that decision and actually stick to that decision and not to go back?
Great question. And you're absolutely right. That's one of the biggest things that holds people back from overcoming their addiction. Because I promise you, 99% of people at some point when they're out drinking or something, like, or the next day, they're like, I'm never drinking again. You know, I want to fix this
Yeah.
problem. And the amount of people that have reached out to me since I've told my story that ask, like, how do you do it? Like, I want to be better, or my husband needs to get better, or my wife needs to get better. Like, you're absolutely right. People want to change,
Yeah.
but that you have the only way in my mind is making that decision. And there, it's almost like there's a pros and cons list you have to make. Like, okay, what benefits do I have of continuing to drink alcohol? And basically, there's only one. You can loosen up and have a little bit of fun out at the
Mhm.
bars. You know, I don't know, but there's that transition phase after drinking, because the thing I think people are most afraid of is the scrutiny and the judgment they're going to get from others if they quit drinking or come out and admit that they have a problem, right? um, and of course that's something that weighs on everybody, but the reality is you have so much more power when you overcome that and come out and admit it and continue to stick with it, because you know you gain the respect from a lot of people.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot more support from people by 1,000 times than you will people hating on you. And the only people that are hating on you for having that problem probably have an issue themselves that they don't want to face, you know?
Yeah.
And so I
Or
think that,
they don't want to change themselves, so they rather try to put you where you are so that they feel comfortable with you being
yeah,
the way you are.
exactly. Yeah, you'll have very close friends that are like, man, why aren't you coming out and drinking with us anymore? Like, dude, just have one drink,
Yeah.
because they want somebody to do it with. You're exactly right. And uh, Now, if you get to that point up here where you can make that decision and decide like it's not for me, like it's wonderful because you could still go out. I still do it from time to time. I'll go out with a group of friends,
Mhm.
go downtown, go have a good time, and be around people drinking. And I'll just sit there and have water, you
Yeah.
know. And I save myself from making stupid decisions, from making an ass out of myself, and then I get to take people home, be responsible for them, and help them, like, get to their destinations at night, and be the sober driver, and then wake up the next morning and go do something productive.
Yeah.
It's um, the pros of getting sober so much outweigh the cons. Like it's unbelievable, and I hope that message that I can get to people that are thinking about getting sober, that just you have to make that decision. I don't care if it's rehab, if it's like going to isolate yourself. Everybody's different. There's this cultural perspective that you have to the only way to get sober is to go to a rehab facility where you sit there for 60 days or 6 weeks or whatever, and that's the only way to get fixed. Well, that's not the truth. It's you have to just make that decision up in your head, like who you're doing it for.
Yeah.
Number one, yourself, of course.
But I think
Also,
sometimes when it comes to yourself, we tend not to love ourselves enough to actually make that decision for ourselves. So it might be beneficial to have somebody outside of us to make that decision for,
right.
which probably was the second that you were going to.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you know, not being the uncle to my nieces and nephews that I wanted to be, not being the son that I wanted to
Yeah.
be. I couldn't even go to holiday gatherings without drinking before, so I could just stand it for an hour and then I just buzz out of there. So I wanted to be a better family member, a better friend. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, you just have to make that decision to become a better version of yourself, because like not having these vices with alcohol and drugs, then you have a lot of time on your hands, right? And you have to fill that
Yeah.
time. And so finding things to be productive, the idle time is where the devil starts to play, right? Is what they say. Um, so finding like whether it's walking or running, working out, finding a local gym, painting, like whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, it's the decision you make in your head that it's just not worth it at the end of the day.
With hiding it. Oh no, actually, when you were talking about that, the friends that are either saying you that, oh, it's just one drink or stuff like that. I think one thing that can be challenging with making that decision is that sometimes even knowing that you could potentially lose your friends, and then you have to come in terms with potentially being alone for a while when you lose those friends, where you have to go through this alone, where
Mhm.
if your friends don't really support you, I would question if they are your friends or real friends. Or they might be in a place where they need to do some work on themselves, or they can't really focus on you or support you, which is different. But that's something that I have, with several conversations that I have had. I'm trying to understand that journey that you go through to get to, let's say, the next level. And one thing that I have heard a lot is that initially when you make that decision, you start to take actions and you start to make gap between you and people around you, friends, family, anybody who's close to you. And then you feel a lot of times like resistance from them or about you actually getting better. And at some point you might actually need to make that distance from them for you to keep going, because it's hard to keep going when you have people trying to kind of pull you back or pull you down. And I think that's where a lot of times people actually make that decision to go back, because then at least you're not alone. You don't
Mhm.
have to go through this alone. Or at least go alone for a while until you find different kind of people or attract different kind of people. But there is some, like, that's what I have seen. You have some period of time when you're going alone. So did you have that period of time, or how did you even go through this journey where, or like that period where you might say no to going out, stuff like that, where usually we teach people how to treat us by certain things that we have done over time. So now they literally have this expectation. You're the one who's
Mhm.
coming always out. Like, what is happening? Like how did that look like?
Yeah. Another great point you bring up of um, kind of the process you go through, because I think that's one of the ultimate tests to maturity and like persevering. Because yes, there of course there's a lonely period when you go, from 6 7 nights a week going to the pub
Yeah.
downtown, and then all of a sudden you're stopping, like, but you have to get comfortable with being alone. And for me, it wasn't too difficult, but yes, like a very big sign of maturing and progressing through your journey is who are you okay with letting go
Yeah.
out of your life. If they're not going to be a proponent for you moving forward, then you know like we can still be in contact with each other, but if you're not ultimately helping me move forward to my goals and to what I want in life, then there's really just no space for you, and that includes family members, like your closest friends,
Yeah.
because through this process you're gonna lose people. It's just how it is, and you have to accept that. It's not your fault, but if they're not going to support you in your life, then like you said, are they really truly your friends? And people get this perspective growing up, and idea that, and this one's a tough one. If family members aren't going to be there for you and support you, don't feel like just because they're blood, like that's something you have to stick with. If they're going to bring you down, they people can cut out family members too. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I haven't completely really cut anybody out, I would say, from
Yeah.
my direct family. There's certainly been a lot less communication from
Yeah.
some, because there's ultimately there's not I can't stand negativity. Somebody that's constantly like, it's always raining out, like, why isn't it this, why isn't it that? It's
Yep.
like, move forward, man, be positive, go make somebody's day better, and that makes your day better. And now when you say, like, finding the next round of people, that's where it's crazy how life in the universe works, right? Like I truly believe in manifesting your future, and how you treat the universe is how you're going to be treated, right? I'm a
Mhm.
huge believer in that. And that's something big that Andy Frisella talks about, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was back home in Nebraska and I reached out to another sober person, this is kind of that
Mhm.
transitional journey of finding those new people, right? So um, being his name, his name is Sean Saban. So he ended up hiring me to work for him, and he's the one who introduced me to Andy Priscilla, right? And so I'm still back home at the time. This is just when I
Yeah.
started getting sober.
Wait, so what made you
Uh,
to reach out to him? Because you said that it might be hard to actually reach out for help or to admit that you have a problem. So how did that look like? Or what helped you to reach out?
so he was a friend of my older brother's for a while,
Mhm.
and I just remember, like, he had been like ups and downs through sobriety. I know he had been sober for a while. He would drink once in a while, and he had had a really rough upbringing. And then he had created his own business, and he was, being an entrepreneur, and like he was just doing really good stuff. And I was like, I wanted to pick his brain on sobriety and stuff. Had no intentions of
Mhm.
like looking for a job or
Yeah.
anything. And when I called him, he was down in Miami, Florida, at a conference for Grant Cardone, and he's like, "It's crazy you just called me. I was just thinking about contacting you because I was looking for somebody to be a sales manager." So it's just one of those things, like, that's the universe working, I believe. And so I start working for him, he introduces me to Andy Frisella in the podcast, and and this is, mind you, this is just 2021, just last year, a year ago.
Yeah, I was about to say this.
And so I started listening to the podcast, and he seldomly mentions First Form, but one of the episodes when he had Tim Grover in and was talking to him, and they were talking about this facility and the people, and I was like, kind of a light bulb moment, right? Where you go back to talking to surrounding yourself with new people or finding new people in your life. Basically, I was like, okay, if this is something meant for me, like, give me a sign. And I'm just talking to the universe. And I kid you not, the signs couldn't have been more clear to move down here to St. Louis. Like, I'm talking like TV commercials popped up the next morning that were like, visit the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it. So I drove down here, saw the facility, saw the people here. And I mean, it was one of those things where, like, do I leave my hometown and the only thing I ever known and my family and everything to pursue this? And, another pros and cons list type of thing. And it's like, of course you have to, I'd recommend that to anybody. If they feel stuck and they're in their hometown, go out and meet new people, go somewhere else. There's a huge world out there. And I was stuck in that small life mentality. So coming out here and now meeting these new people, hundreds of new people, all headed in the right direction, the same direction, it's incredible. Like, you are who you surround yourself with, right? That's such a true statement, and it's, showing itself here.
Okay, first off, I want you to explain actually how long it took you to get it, because it wasn't like, oh, I just go on like 30-minute drive to get an interview. It wasn't that. But like, what actually made you to go there? Because one thing is that, or even see those signs, because a lot of times we have signs, but we don't listen to them, or we decide to ignore them, because a lot of times we even know that, oh, this is the decision that I should take. But what actually helped you to make that decision? Because it wasn't like, oh, I'm just gonna move to the city next to me or something like that. Like, it was a long drive just to get to the interview without any guarantee that you will get the job.
Right. Yeah. So St. Louis is 9 hours from my hometown. So it started out by just simply submitting an application. And honestly, it's like, kind of like you're saying, is just like, okay, I don't even know if this is something like, these are elite people. How is somebody like me gonna even get accepted to this? So got an email back, and that's one of those things like, holy shit, like, they actually reached back out. So I was like, okay, I'll take a couple days and I'll drive down there, and just, if worst comes to worst, I get to see the facility. Maybe I get to see Andy Frisella walking by, and I get to see St. Louis for the first time. So come down here, have an excellent interview. Love the facility, love St. Louis. Like, it's beautiful around here. And so next day, drive back home and go back to work. And so 9 hours down here, 9 hours back home, go back to work, get a call, and they want to schedule a second interview with me. And mind you, they're not paying for this stuff, and I'm not sitting there just dishing out money either. So a couple weeks later, I drive back down for a second interview, and it goes great again. And then stayed, instead of just driving back right away after that, I actually stayed in St. Louis for another night. They invited me back. It was a Friday for a group workout, which was awesome. But basically, they don't tell you, but it's kind of like, okay, making sure that I'm not a lazy, person, because they put you through the ringer in these workouts. And had a great workout. And then go back home. Still didn't know if I had the job. But then they called me and offered me the job. And this would have been, I believe it was on my birthday last year when they offered me the job, which is December 8th.
Mm-hmm.
And so I accepted it and said, I need a month to put my house on the market, get it for sale, try and get it sold, and then I can move down and get a place. So yeah, it was very quick. In fact, so last year at Thanksgiving, which is at the end of November, that's when I told my parents I was thinking about taking a job down in St. Louis. And of course they were like, oh yeah, sure. Like, sure. And now here I am, and they've got to come down here and see this facility. And our company treated them like kings and queens, and they're just absolutely blown away. They can't believe it. So it's been an amazing year.
Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to ask was about taking risks, because all you did really initially until you got that phone call about you got the job, it was pretty much like taking a risk without knowing whether it's going to pay off or not. What helped you? Because even like before that, there were some things that you were doing that were actually risky or might have felt risky. Even saying that or admitting to yourself that I need help or I have a problem, which by itself, it's a huge thing to deal with or to admit to yourself. Because one thing that I usually describe about these kind of things is that let's say if you have somebody come over and you in like an hour and you have to clean up your place, usually you put like all your stuff in one room and nobody goes in that room. Everything is there, nobody goes in there. And I think that's the same thing that we do with our minds is, you know, all these things that you don't want to address, you kind of put them away and you don't want to turn the light on because you know that it's a mess and you don't want to clean it up. And you know that it will take a work to clean that up. So we just put everything there and we don't want to address it. It just stays there. But at the same time, as we go on with life, we actually know that it's there. You know that it's there. You can't really avoid knowing that it's there. But addressing it, that's where I think, but I think you also said that facing the truth, that facing that truth, that's, I think, is one of the hardest things to do. We actually face it, where you can't really not look at it. You actually have to look at it, and you have to admit a lot of times to yourself, I suck, or I messed up, or I'm a mess, which we don't want to admit. Our egos don't want to hear that. It's not something we want to hear about ourselves or know about ourselves. But like getting back to risks. So technically, from somebody, let's say from even like maybe your parents at the time, it might have seemed like it doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? You don't even know if you're going to get the job. Or maybe if you said somebody, oh, I'm going to this interview 9 hours away that I don't even know if I'm going to get. And then you go again and you're like, oh, it's a second one, but I don't know if I'm going to get the job. From the side, it might be like, it doesn't make sense. But like, what is the importance of taking the risks, and how do you decide which risks to take or not to take?
Yeah, that's a tough one because that's a heavy one. You know, you have to just there's so much out there, and it's one of those things like what am I going to lose? You know, so coming out here, I mean, it was a drastic pay cut too. You know, with First Form, you no matter your credentials or what you've done, your age, nothing, you start at the bottom because it's an earned thing, right? And of course, I wasn't coming out here to start at, you know, $15 an hour. Like that wasn't my goal. And so, but I could see the vision going forward. I could see where the company's headed. I can see their core values and them living by who they are and their mission. And so I'm playing for, okay, where can I be by the time I turn 40 years old? You know, if I stay in my hometown where I was at, I can live a comfortable life where, you know, I can pay my bills. I can maybe travel every couple of years. But it's just that it's that small town, like generic life mindset. But that's how most people are raised, right? You know, you grow up, you go to school, you go to college, you find a girlfriend or a husband, you have kids, and then you repeat the cycle, right? You have a house, a dog, a family, you die, repeat the cycle. And so I think a lot of people get stuck in that, which, don't get me wrong, it's a great life, it's a comfortable life, but comfort is what kills you ultimately. Now, so the risk I was taking was to find who I felt I truly was, because I always told my mom specifically, I have so much potential and I'm leaving so much on the table, and I'm absolutely tired of doing that. And now, at least if I go to St. Louis and first form, if that's not the end step, it's going to be another step towards maybe somewhere else, but ultimately I'm going to develop myself. I'm going to find out more about who I am and where my powerful attributes are. I'm going to meet thousands of new people, and taking that risk is so worth it to me. Now, I don't get to see my family as often. I don't get to see my nieces and nephews as often. I don't certainly get to see my old friends as often, but that's the beautiful thing. You can always meet new people. You meet new friends, and not that I'm just putting my old life on the wayside. That's not the case. Thank God for FaceTime and technology like this. But you have to take that risk, knowing that it's going to be a step to another direction. And what ultimately, if worse comes to worse, guess what? You can always revert and go back to your comfort zone. Home's always going to be there. My hometown's always going to be there. I always will know that there's going to be a place I can go and live if shit hits the fan. But sometimes this is one of the sayings that I loved, because I was researching St. Louis, and like, is it worth leaving your hometown and taking the risk to go somewhere else? And the best thing I heard was, just, you're standing on the top, you're on the high dive, looking down at the water, and it's like, just jump. The water's going to be cold at first, but you're going to swim, you're going to get used to it, and then you have this whole new world opened up to you. And that's truly what's happened here. All I could read online was St. Louis is the murder capital of the USA. And I come down here, and it's absolutely beautiful. And our company's involved with like the professional baseball teams and the hockey teams, and we get to go to all these events, and we get to meet wonderful, amazing people that are doing good things for this world. And I mean, there's life is so much simpler than I think we make it out to be. It's, if you can have a roof over your head, have a little income, and like you can be a nomad, like anybody. If you could talk to people and go up and introduce yourself, you're going to be able to find a job. You're going to be able to apply, find an apartment or a house. You know what I mean? People just get so stressed out about the easiest things, thinking it's so complicated when it's really not. I could leave here today, go out to Tampa, Florida. I could move over to Europe and find a job tomorrow and find a bungalow or whatever you call them over there.
No idea.
And but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's, people make things so complicated, but it's worth the risk to go out, meet new people, create new adventures, and but people are also get comfortable, and I completely understand, and people are okay with that. It's just, people are different. But personally, Austria, I knew I had the potential to do many, many, many things, and most importantly, I wanted to help people in some way. And so again, finding First Form, and that's exactly what they do, is just a recipe kind of made. Just those. It's crazy going to how life happens. That's why I so strongly believe like everything happens for a reason. Going through my addiction, through my divorce, through all the bad times have led me to where I'm at now, and talking to somebody like yourself, it's incredible to me.
Okay, there's several things that I want to unpack here. First off, when you said that you knew you had potential and you were saying that to your mom, that is something that you don't really hear that often coming from people where let's say you, and I'm assuming you can say whether it was the case or not. If you're in a situation where you don't really have, let's say when you were having this addiction, externally, you don't really have any proof that you have potential because you keep failing, or you might even have the feedback that you're nothing, you will go nowhere or stuff like that. But what was it that actually gave you that sense or understanding that I have a big potential? Because that's not something that I hear often from people going through that journey where they actually initially externally they have this feedback that you're nothing, you're nobody, or you're a failure.
Yeah. Where it stems from, I have no idea. I've always had this air of confidence and probably a little bit of arrogance. Yeah, it came from, I was always very naturally talented at a lot of things, but I was also different. Like, I don't know, I was whimsical. I'm pretty weird too. Like, I just have accepted it by now. That used to offend me, getting called weird, but I like being goofy
I
and
was
stuff.
usually getting called crazy, and initially I would feel like, and I would try to explain myself or the way I think, and I'm really good at communicating, and I would get like confused if people don't really understand it. And then at some point, I don't know at what point exactly, but quite early, it started to shift where whenever somebody would call me crazy, I'm like, oh, thanks.
Yeah. Yes, you have to embrace it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's a beautiful thing to have and a trait because, again, going back to fitting the traditional mold, it's like don't
Yeah.
stand out or you'll get hammered, right? But I think the weird people, the crazy people are the ones that have the best ideas, that become the most creative, that have the potential to become successful. But going back to feeling that potential, I I don't know. I remember when I was like 14 years old and I told my older brother, we were driving in his car one time,
How old?
and I was probably 14.
Okay.
And I just told him I'm meant for something else in this world. I don't know what it is. I'm just meant for something. Um, and
How
so
did you
like
know that? Because that's young.
I know I have no idea. I
Okay.
specifically remember saying that, and again, maybe it's just an arrogance or a self conceited thing, but and I still feel like I'm trying to find that. I feel like I'm getting closer each and every day to finding what it is I'm meant for, and maybe that's what I'm living out now through this company. I don't know, but um, and so that was a big thing that was always during my addiction. That was another thing holding me back because I was like, if I have this addiction, I literally can't do anything else. It's gonna tie me down. And so that was another big driving force of like getting done with addiction. Like if I get this off of my back, then I can really try and pursue what I feel like I'm meant to pursue instead of just thinking it and talking about it, like go and
Yeah.
actually being about it, you know?
Which is a huge difference. But like it sounds like you had quite good level of awareness as well. If you were able to even think about that, if I keep going down this path, I won't be able to go down this path. And you have to have some kind of level of awareness to be able to even think about it or analyze it that way. Because most of the times when you have addiction, I assume, I can't really fully talk about it. You kind of focus only on the fact that I can't do this. I can't quit. But I want to quit, but I can't. I want to quit, I can't. And actually one thing that I wrote down earlier about that decision that I want to change. A lot of times I think we or let's say that you said that, I don't know, you wake up next day and you know, oh, I want to make change. We think about that wanting to make change when we live those consequences, because then you feel really bad. But what do you do next day when you feel good and you're like, oh, I might as well drink? And I think it's important to make that decision when you actually feel good, or let's say you're not living in those like results of decisions you made the day before, where now when you are emotionally feeling like shit, you want to make change. But what happens when you feel amazing? Do you still want to make that change, or you kind of want to go to have like a drink or something like that? But one thing that I wanted to also ask you about was, you said that you went to interview or left the town knowing that it will take you to the next level. or potentially next step towards the next level. Because that knowing, that is something that I think it's really interesting to understand what is it actually was that knowing piece, because it might be like your confidence in potentially that working out or whatever. But I think when we know that this will work out, it's more likely that actually it will, or at least we will take bigger action or even take that step or go to that interview or whatever, when you know that it will work out. What was it that actually made you or gave you that sense that you know that it will work out, where you didn't really have a reason to know, technically?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. But honestly, what is the worst that could happen if you surround yourself with 300 people that are actively working out, actively eating correctly, and actively pursuing like a high paying, successful career and
Oh,
families,
I know.
right?
Your ego gonna get hurt.
Well, yeah, that's potential. But if you're surrounded by all these
Yeah.
people and you come in with the right mindset and asking the right questions, and also stepping, like somebody like myself, I come in here at 32 years old with a lot of these people here are in their lower to mid 20s, right? I've had a lot of life experience that has
Yeah.
happened to me that will help me not just learn from them, but also be able to teach them a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why I was able to accelerate very rapidly and grow through this company. That's the big reason why. Life experience, being in different jobs and situations. But ultimately, going back to your question, if you come in with the right mindset that you're surrounded by all these people that are successful and trying to become successful, that's going to do absolutely nothing but make you better. You are the average of the people you surround yourself with, right? So it's almost like you're living in a bubble here. We have this huge facility, a huge gym, a lot of really great things at our fingertips. And so if you are running the right plays and living by these core values and this mission, you literally have nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
So for me, unless I ultimately completely screwed it up myself, the risk was very, very minimum that I wasn't going to become a better person coming down here to St. Louis, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes, a big thing we say around here is like, burn the ships, don't even think about having a plan B, because that can set you up for failure. This was my only option. Like, yes, do I still have back home? Sure. But that's not an option. I was going to come down here and succeed no matter what. And the
Yeah.
tools that First Form has laid out for me thus far have been absolutely incredible. But relationships have been incredible. So if you're going to take that risk, you got to have the mindset. Like, you can't go into anything with your tail tucked between your legs. You have to go in there like humble, but also I'm going to kick ass. I'm going to become better myself. I'm going to make people around me better, because if you provide value for other people, that's how you're going to become successful. If you make the guy above you's job easier, you're going to become successful, and then bring somebody else up behind you. It's a beautiful scenario where you're becoming more successful and you're helping somebody else become successful.
Yeah.
So with going back to taking the risk, like, go in there with your head held high, your chest out, and like, you're going to take this on. If it doesn't work out, guess what? That's okay. You don't have to all of a sudden, just because it doesn't work out, resort back to your old habits, to your old town, to your old drinking, to your old buddies. Like, it's okay if something doesn't work out. Move on, find something else. As long as you don't quit, that means you don't lose. You just got to keep pushing forward.
I think it also big role is played by your relationship to failing, because I think a lot of times we have this mindset that let's say if somebody was in your situation, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna go and take this risk, and if they don't get the job, it's like, see, this is why I'm this and that, this is not meant for me, and then they go back. And building that relationship with the failure, whenever you fail, it doesn't really define you or whatever, it's just the feedback. Either you weren't prepared enough, or you're not at the level that you should be to either get a job or opportunity or whatever, or you just there's like something that you need to learn to level up, or it just wasn't meant for you. There's something that we can learn from any time when we fail, but that's an interesting thing that even like for myself, it took me so long to be okay with failing, because I would not take opportunities because of, and that's something that I had a conversation with one of my clients about, fear of success. And I was asking her, do you have fear of success, or do you have a fear of potentially bigger failure the more success that you get? Because the more successful you become, the more potentially you can fail, or the bigger the fall can be. So maybe you're not really afraid of the failure, but you're afraid of that potential fall that you want to go through, or you don't want others to see, or whatever. And that's where even like, for me, I think one really big thing that helped, and a really good concept how to describe it, I kind of realized recently, was about overcoming the walls. So let's say you have this big wall that you need to overcome. It can be anything, getting out of your comfort zone, or just like, let's say, not drinking this drink today or now. And a lot of times we, even like, let's say going to job interview, I think that could be a better one, or applying for a job. Instead of focusing on actually taking that step to apply and show up, we focus on what could potentially be on the other side of the wall. We don't get the job. So now you don't actually even take that action, because you could potentially not get the job. But if you focus just on, not on what's beside on the other side of the wall, because you can't really see that, but just on overcoming that wall, which is taking that first action step, that's a win. What happens next, you deal with that when it appears, whatever. But just taking that first step, that's something that once I started to focus on that, it's something that I also wrote what about, I think in one of your posts you were mentioning that how decisions lead to opportunity. Even like in your story, it wasn't just that doors opened up for you. You actually took the first step to apply for the job, to reach out for the help. And it's something that I see with some people that initially they create their own opportunities by taking that first step, but they kind of feel that, oh, I'm lucky. Kind of, sort of, potentially, yes. But if you didn't take that first step, you wouldn't even be in a situation where you can get lucky, or you can get that opportunity. But that's where you make that decision, you take that action, and that's where you get those results or opportunities or whatever. And that's something that I just find it so interesting, how we kind of create our own fate in a way. There's many things that play a role in that anyways, but taking that first step, that's something that feels so hard or so challenging. But once you start to do that, you start to see that, oh, so this is how it works. Actually, when I'm proactive, that's where I get those results. And that's something that I, even like as I was listening to your story, or I was like researching you as much as I could on like your Instagram, that's where I started to notice that you actually, it wasn't like you were sitting at home and you were like, okay, at what point does my life get better? Like you weren't actually doing that. You started to take steps. You started to reach out. You started to even admit to yourself that I have a problem. I need to deal with it. I need help. And you actually traveled like 9 hours just to do job interview, which most people would be like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Or like, especially if you're not in that mindset, or like, let's say the right mindset, where you understand that you have to take that risk, even if it's a fail potentially. But that's something that I find like really interesting to see and understand how it works, because we have so many blocks in our minds that, as you said, and that's the next thing that I want to talk about is what you said about the life is really simple. And that's something that I think even today, I think I wrote in my story about that 90% of the life is easy. It's doing it that's hard, or actually starting it. That's where it's hard. But once you start it, or you get used to it and you do it, that's where it gets actually easy. Even like my swims. Last year, they were really hard or felt really hard. But now it's just another thing that I do. It's
wild.
But
that's wild.
But that's the thing. Like it's exactly what I said to you before the recording. That and that's something that I say. I think that the best way how I usually describe it is, it's hard until it isn't. It might seem hard in the beginning, where let's say with the swims are like really good example because you're literally like freezing, you're suffering.
Right.
Or like when initially when you start to take those steps, it feels really hard. Even like with my swims, I realized that last year, first 2 weeks, my initial thought as I would approach the river would be, I wonder if I gotta get in today. And then after 2 weeks, the question changed to, I wonder how long I'm gonna stay in today. So it wasn't about whether I will get in or not. It was about how long I'm gonna stay in. So it's just and that's something that I have learned about confidence, is that you have to do the thing long enough until you prove yourself that you can do it. Then you don't question your ability to do that. But like in your situation with getting sober, I think initially before you got like sober, it was like 8 months, and then you got back to it when you hit the rock bottom. What was it that helped you to kind of get back on it? Because I think, again, what I said before is that and that's something that the sports psychologist Dr. Rob Bell also said in episode when I was talking to him about, a lot of times we have this mindset where you, especially with New Year's resolutions, that you have to have only one mistake, and then that's good enough reason for you to quit. So like in your case, you had one mistake or you hit rock bottom. That was a good enough reason for you to quit and not to try again. What was it that actually made you to try again?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in what you said there, and a lot of great things to hit on, because I mean, your story and your example of getting into the cold water is it's almost a perfect layout of how life works. It starts with progression, taking that first step. Am I even going to get in today? And then that turns into, okay, how long am I going to stay? But everything, it seems like a common thing that keeps popping up in life is like, it's all about the first step. Coming up on New Year's with people doing the resolutions, it's that first step. People are so scared of that first step. Like, they're more scared of that first walk in, that the door opening into the gym, and they feel like 10,000 people are going to sit there and stare at them coming into the door like, who the fuck is this coming in? And that's not the truth at all, but that's what they're scared of. So that's what matters, because the perspective is the reality in their mind, right? That's just how life works. So tying that into, how did I get back on it? Because yes, sober for 8 months, and then COVID. So March 2020, COVID happened, the divorce happened, and
so it was like all at once.
Yeah, almost exactly at the same time. While COVID was happening, we were going through divorce procedures. Luckily, we had no kids. She just wanted out, and I took care of all the legal stuff, paid $0 to any lawyers, got it done within 3 months. So that was a blessing, got that done. But that was just when the spiral started. It was partying, drinking, new girls. I mean, you name it. Just
so was it like you're coping with that situation?
Pretty much. And it was also like, okay, if I get back into drinking, she's going to know it was her fault. That's what I was saying at the time. So I was going to try and make her feel bad about it. Because there was a lot in my life I still hadn't learned and corrected at that time. The biggest one being, extreme ownership in myself and my problems and my issues. And, having come to the realization, especially after reading the book, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, absolute life-changing book. I'd recommend that to absolutely anybody. But it talks about, and this goes with anything, like going back to you talking about the job interviews, like knowing if you're going to get the job or not. And if you didn't, whose fault is that? It's certainly not the company's fault, right? If you're not what they're looking for, that's not them being mean. It's because you're not what they're looking for. And you have to literally take a step back and look at yourself and your life and think back, okay, what did I do wrong? What do I need to improve on so I can go back and get this job? Looking at yourself and taking that ownership a lot is going to change a lot of things in your life. And that goes with addiction, with starting to get into the gym, with starting to go into a cold water plunge, whatever it is. Like, you got to look at yourself first and then take that first step. And ultimately, like it's kind of tough love, but you have to stop being a wimp in the kindest way possible and just do it.
Or like a
Because
victim.
yes, exactly. Stop justifying why you're not going to the gym. Stop justifying why you're not eating right. Like, and you said some people can take that one day and make a mistake, and then all of a sudden that's a means for them to quit on their journey. But you have to look at it on a broader scale. If, and Andy talks about this all the time, you know, if you won 363 days out of the year and lost 2 days out of the year, guess what? You won that year by a landslide. You know, so this goes the same thing with people dieting. People think, okay, they eat correctly for a week. They went from eating 3,500 calories of shit food and then switched to water and salad. Like, you think that's going to be sustainable for a long time?
I was about to say not sustainable.
Exactly. That's why we teach consistency is the ultimate key. If you pick something that is relatively simple that you can stick to, then over a period of time, that's going to ultimately be the biggest impact. If you hit these holidays, that's what I talked about on my story on Thanksgiving. Like, I'll be the first one to admit I ate like absolute shit. Any pie, anything in front of me, like I was eating it. But that doesn't mean the next day I can't go back to eating healthy, hitting the gym, working my ass off. You know, one slip up doesn't mean it's end game. And people, like you said, they're like, well, I didn't stick to my diet today, so that means I'm just done. I'm going to wait till next year. And they'll literally wait till next year. After it's going to be January 14th, they'll be like, well,
yep.
2023 is not my year, I guess. So,
oh my gosh. And it happens literally like every year. And that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't say I'm a fan of New Year's resolutions. And usually I even recommend people to start before the New Year's, because now you start to build that momentum so that you can actually start the year strong. You are already in the rhythm to start that step. But even what you said about looking at yourself, that's something that I wrote down earlier when we were talking about friends, or like that expectation. Literally, like that's what I wrote about, like expectations that I expect my friends, family to support me on my journey, where actually you haven't given them reason to support you. Because up to this point, fail. Why would we expect others to support us if we haven't actually given them reason to support us, if we keep failing? And initially it's helpful to get that support. And I have nothing against support, but if you now sit and wait and have this expectation for somebody to support you, for you to start, you're probably never going to start, especially if you're not in the right environment. But I think I don't remember where I was listening to this, about this like snowflake mentality, where let's say we do a work and it might be actually more than 1 week. I don't know, like some people actually go longer than a week or like 2 weeks. But let's say you do work for like, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, which is compared to, I don't know, 90% of people, that's like a lot more. And now you get to this mindset of expectation that now I'm special. I have put in the work. I actually deserve these like huge results. And you now sit and wait and you get frustrated when you don't get those results. But that's something that, again, I wish I remembered where I heard that about. Most of the things that I think it was Grant Cardone. Most of the things in life that you expect to get, you kind of had this expectation. Okay, I'm going to become like millionaire in like 2 years, or like most people are like in a year or like 3 months, whatever is the number they put on. And he said, guaranteed, all of the things that you set as your goals or expectations will take much longer and will take much harder work. So now if you go in with that expectation that it's actually going to be much harder than I think it will be, it's more likely you will actually keep going until you get to that result or whatever. And that's something that I usually say about winning, that for you to win or succeed, you just have to go one step further than the person next to you. If you do that, you win. But you just have to go one step further. And that's something that I see a lot, even like with social media. I want to get like 1 million followers today, or like tomorrow, in a week. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, if you go
Right.
long enough, you will build your skills, you will build your understanding of your audience or whatever, and you will get to that result. But if you get that expectation, and expectations, I think, are so dangerous because they can actually get in our way to take those consistent baby steps. Because if you have, even like with weight loss, if you have expectation, I want to lose that many, I think in US it's pounds, here it's kilos, weight in this long amount of time. And if you don't hit that expectation, now that's a reason for you to quit. But you don't see that you actually made progress. You focus
Right.
on how far away you are from the goal instead of seeing how far away you are from the starting line. And
Exactly.
instead of focusing how far you are from the starting line, focus on how far you are from the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of times it's like, okay, this is good enough reason for me to quit.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And there is that, and that is that snowflake mentality you talked about. Like, if you're sitting around waiting for support and talking about it, one big an easy way to lose support from people is to say you're going to do something and then not do it. The easiest way
Mhm.
you'll lose trust from anybody. So that's one thing I've had to learn to improve with myself, and I think a lot of people forget about, like, if you're going to go and say, okay, if you're telling everybody, I'm starting tomorrow, I'm losing 30 pounds, it's going to happen. And then you don't do that. And then the next time you say, 6 months down the road, you're like, guys, I'm serious this time. I'm going to lose 30 pounds. And then, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, you said this before.
Yeah.
And then you do it again, and people are like, dude, just shut up. Like, we don't care. You're never going to get that support. So, first of all, don't even talk about what you're going to do. Like, just go do it. And
Yeah.
if you think people give a shit about you, they don't. Like, people care when the results happen. Like,
Yeah.
Andy talks about it all the time. The belief comes after the work.
Yeah.
If you go out and lose 30 pounds and don't say a word about it, people are going to be like, holy shit, like, how'd you do it? What'd you do? You know what I mean? Just go and be about it. Don't talk about it. Go
Yeah.
out and be about it. And, like, suffering right there, suffering in silence it's huge, because you're busting ass, you're waking up when nobody else is up, you're putting in the work, you're eating things you don't necessarily enjoy, but you're becoming healthier, you're becoming better. Everything that you're doing is translating into the rest of your life. You're becoming
Yeah.
a better person, you're more active, you're a better family member, you're there for your spouse or your kids, or your job. Like, you just people think of, like, physical fitness in this journey, like, strictly in pounds or kilos. Like, I want to do this to lose weight, but they don't put into perspective how much the mentality side gets changed and how much
Yeah.
that can help you in your life. And that's where, like, 75 hard comes into play, with Andy Frisella. And it's not a body weight, like, weight loss challenge.
Yeah.
It's a mental aptitude challenge. And it's crazy
Program.
what you can.
He doesn't
Yeah,
like when people call it challenge.
you're right. Don't tell him I said that. um, but yeah, I mean, it's a trial for your mentality,
Yeah.
and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing about developing these good habits, because it takes so long to put these good habits into place, but you always have to get over that first hurdle, that first cliff. Like,
Yeah.
it's just everything in life is very, very similar, and as far as, like, the steps you have to take to progress forward, whether it's
Yeah.
fitness, whether it's your career, your family, relationships. Why do you think so many people struggle to get into relationships with somebody they want? It's because, like you were talking earlier, they're scared of the failure, they're scared of what's on the other side of asking somebody out on a date, because why would I go and ask somebody
Yeah.
if they're just going to say no? Well, for every 7 no's, you're probably going to get 3 yeses. So,
Yeah. Yeah, but
you
like
know,
another thing that I have seen is that a lot of times we have this idea of who we want to be our partner, but we don't think about, okay, I have this person that I want to attract or be with, but we don't think about what does that person actually want? Who do I need to become to actually attract that person? We just want to get this amazing person without putting work in ourselves to actually be attractive to that person. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's easier to sit around and know. And that's something that I see in a lot of relationships, or like with a lot of people that have been in relationships. Oh, I keep attracting this like wrong person, or every person that I'm with is this and that. And I'm like, okay, if you look at all your relationships, there's one common like variable, and that's you.
Yep,
So
exactly.
maybe we could start looking at yourself and what is it that you need to change in yourself or develop in yourself, or maybe you just attract or focus on the wrong things in the partner that you want to attract. It can be anything, but a lot of times we want to blame everything around us or outside of us on the life that we have, instead of looking inwards and looking at what is it that we need to change to actually get to a better place. Because nothing wrong about blaming others. Like anybody could do whatever they want to, but if you actually want to get a better life and you're not really that happy with your old one, or you're sometimes, even like when I feel like I'm complaining about stuff, which I'm not sure I necessarily, my complaining is like complaining that most people would like describe as complaining, but I sometimes even get tired of it. And I'm like, okay, how long can I actually do this? Like, it doesn't make sense. I get tired of complaining and I'm like, okay, you might as well just go and do something. Which is actually another thing that I wanted to mention before. When you said about when people talk about it or talk about what is it that they want to achieve or what they want to do, stuff like that, that actually gives, when you talk about it, it gives you false sense of accomplishment. Because now you start to paint this image of, oh, I want to get this done or achieve this and that, lose this weight or build a business, whatever. That's when you feel good. And you can even potentially for a short like amount of time, make yourself look good in front of other people. But then when it actually comes to doing the work, that's where most people kind of like, or don't do it, because it's not, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's not easy. And it all comes back to that, us like overcomplicating it. Which actually I wanted to ask you, like, why you think we overcomplicate things when most of the times they're quite simple?
That's a great question. Our mind is such a crazy thing to battle with, because you're right. It's the game plan in life is so simple, but it's difficult to achieve because it's hard, and people don't like hard. That's just a fact of life. People don't like doing hard shit.
Yeah.
Is it easy to wake up every morning at 4 a.m. and go to the gym and bust your ass and then come in, work for 12, 15 hours, go home, go to sleep and repeat? No, it's not. But it's so fulfilling. You feel so much better. Like you're what you're doing when you do that is you're relieving the anxiety in your mind of wanting to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle of, like you said, people talk about it and that makes them feel good, but putting boots to the ground is where it gets difficult, and actually doing it, like telling yourself, like, you wake up on a Sunday, you have the Sunday scaries, you're like, tomorrow I'm gonna get after it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna start working out, I'm gonna live this healthy life. And then Monday comes around and you're like, oh man, next Monday I'll get to it, I promise I'm gonna do it.
You know what I have learned about this is that when we set these goals, we feel amazing. And now we imagine that once we actually go and do it, we will feel motivated every single day. And when you wake up that next day at like 4 a.m., you don't feel motivated. And that's where you kind of, you lose that kind of what you expected that will happen. It doesn't happen. And you're like, oh, it actually doesn't feel as good as I thought it gonna. So I might as well just keep sleeping or whatever.
Right. But then that's where that compounding effect happens of, in the back of your mind, you have that anxiety because you told yourself you were going to do something and then you didn't do it. And so now you have that little piece weighing on you for the rest of the day or the rest of that week until you say it again. And then you don't do it, and then it just builds up a little more. So you're building up this anxiousness in the back of your mind because you're not doing what you told yourself you were going to do or what you told others you were going to do. Yeah. And then you try and like cover that, you try and justify it, like, oh, fuck it, like it's not that big of a deal anyway. Yeah. but ultimately there's still that little bit of anxiety built up. So how do you relieve that is by actually going and doing it. While your suffering now is going to be beneficial in the future. Like there's a lot of things I do in my life that I tell myself it's going to suck, but it's like you're going to thank yourself tomorrow. Like I hate meal prepping, for example. Hate it. Hate going to Walmart. Hate meal prepping. But I know that the next day when I wake up early in the morning and I'm running out to go to the gym and I reach in the fridge and I've got this beautiful bowl of food that I get to eat for lunch, I literally thank myself, my past self. I'm like, good job, buddy. And, head off, because I know that I'm going to be able to have this sustenance that's good for me at lunch, and I'm going to be able to track it easy in my phone. I'm going to be on a good pace for hitting my protein and my macros for that day. And you're rewarding yourself by accomplishing things in the past, which is a crazy way to look at it, but it's very, very true.
Oh, it's not.
And so, you're relieving that anxiety because you're actually going through the difficult shit now, as opposed to putting it off. People are so easy at putting things off. But if you just take care of it and face it and handle it, like take 20 seconds of courage, and that starts with one step, that little piece of momentum. And even it's something as simple as like getting in the car, like in the morning, you're like, I do not want to go to the gym, but now you're in the car and you drive there and you're still sitting outside of the gym. You're like, man, I don't want to go in. But then you take that first step in the gym, you get in your own space, you put on your headphones and you're rocking and rolling. And next thing you know, you're done with this kick-ass workout. You're feeling good. You have great energy going into the day. And you look back and you're like, it was absolutely worth that little bit of sucking earlier, But then ultimately you start developing these good habits. Now it's like this morning I slept until 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and I was like, oh, I feel like a piece of shit, because I'm so used to the 4 a.m., and so but these habits are so good to develop it, and it might suck to start, but it's so worth it. Like you're relieving this anxiety by just taking actionable steps, like Andy talks about all the time. He is not a special human being. He puts in action. He does what he says he's going to do. And that's the biggest thing, like how people perceive you is, are you talking about it or are you being about it? We talk about that so often because everybody plays that mind game, Astra, of I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. Well, the second you don't do that, it builds up, and then you develop complacency or justifications, and then
even like lose trust yourself.
Yeah, exactly right. And so that can make you just get so complacent. Complacency kills dreams, it kills lives, it kills motivation. It does, and you see it all the time. And when I talk about that small town mentality, that small life mentality, like while it's not a bad thing, like that's life for people, and that's okay. I was set up to live that life. I was married, I had a house, like I was living the small town life. And that's very okay. But there's more out there, and a lot of that mentality leads to you sitting there and pondering, like one of the two scariest words in life can be what if. If you're sitting there at your house, you're watching TV, you're sitting there, like watching the season premiere of The Voice, which is great, you're comfortable, but still in the very back pit of your mind, you're thinking, what if I would have went out there and tried out for that team? What if I would have taken that opportunity somewhere else? Like what else could life be? And the last thing you want to do is be on your deathbed and look back on your life. The biggest thing is going to be regret, not taking those actionable steps, not living a true life to fulfill yourself,
Yeah.
and it really all comes back to these small little decisions, these little tiny wins, and a great way to think about it. And Sal talks about this a lot. Sal Frisella, Andy's brother, who's the president of
Mhm.
Firstborn. We have a meeting with him every single Monday, and if you picture it like a big bucket, your life is a big water bucket, and each little win is just a drop, a drop, a drop, and eventually, that bucket gets fuller and fuller, and you can start, you have some water to expunge, right? And you can start using that to help other people, to fill up their cups a little bit, to put drops in their bucket, but ultimately these little wins are each drops. And little wins can be something like you got up and you made your bed, you got up and you read 10 pages out of a good book that's going to be a developmental type of thing to help you progress forward. You hit the gym that day, you hit your protein and your macros that day. You didn't slip up and eat a cookie or something like that. Like, these are little tiny wins. And one of the biggest things you can do in your life to succeed is create a power list. Something Andy
Yeah.
talks about, as a huge proponent of, is having 5 things you can do during that day that are going to take you 1% better that day, and make that list something simple as like making your bed. If you don't do that, and it seems like a simple thing,
Yeah.
but it's teaching you discipline. Like, I hate my bed being made. I don't like sleeping in it. I absolutely despise it. Your feet feel stuck. Like, but I still cannot leave my house now without making my bed. I just cannot do it. But now that's a habit. It's
Yeah.
developed into a habit. So that's no longer part of my daily task.
Yeah.
It's just a habit thing now. It's just what I do. So you replace that with something else that you want to develop into a habit, right? And that could be reading 10 pages. That can be drinking a gallon of water. Whatever you feel like can make you take an extra step forward for that day, put it on that list. And that's going to propel you forward. No matter what, you're going to become better by accomplishing that list. And if you win, if you do that list 5 out of the 7 days of that week, guess what? You won that week. You have to, people think about things in a small perspective, going all the way back to where you talked about they do one thing wrong and they feel like that is a determinant for them to quit. Look at it into a broader perspective. Okay, if I worked out 25 out of the 30 days this month, guess what? I won that month ultimately. Maybe there's 5 days I was a piece of shit and didn't do anything.
Yeah.
You still won that month. So that should give you the encouragement to keep going and justifying, like, maybe you don't want to go to the gym that day, but in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be so much better. It's an hour out of your day to make yourself better. And you're going to feel better after that. You're going to accomplish more after that. You're going to get your daily tasks done. Like, because your days will fly by if you wake up late, turn on Netflix, sit there, take a nap. Your days goes by like that. And then all of a sudden it's 9 p.m. and you haven't got shit done. You're not prepared for the week. Like, your head's not in the right space. You're already running behind. It's building up anxiety in you. And then on Monday comes around and you're sitting there thinking, like, why am I stressed out? It's because you didn't take care of the things you're telling yourself in your head you wanted to take care of,
Yeah, for sure. Even a few things that I wrote down that I wanted to mention that I also have learned, even what you said about if you don't do the task and now you think about it for the rest of the day. It's a huge lesson that I have learned from my mentor that I think one day I didn't do squats in the gym because I felt like anxious or stuff like that. And he said to me, now, because you didn't do them, you will think about it for the rest of your day. Just because you didn't do them. And that's something that now I remind myself so many times when I feel I don't know, some anxiety, or I don't feel like I want to do it, I have one thought. If I will not do it now, I'll think about it for the rest of my day. And that will not leave my mind. And I might actually think about it next week or after that. I don't know how long, but I know that it's something that will be on my mind just because I didn't do it. But once you do it, it just goes away because you did it. And with baby steps, or let's say the power list, that is something that, let's say, even with the power list, if you finish, let's say, 10 tasks that week, not even that great, if you have 5 a day, finish like 1, maybe 2 a day, let's say. But then if you look at the year, you now have finished 500 extra tasks that year. That's not a small number. And I think many times we just underestimate the power of baby steps, or how, like, even what you said, like compound effect, how they actually build up. And that's where the big change actually is made. Because initially, especially with New Year's resolutions, now I'm going to start and train like 4 hours a day, no cheat meals, read like 5 books a day, whatever, like just like extreme goals that you actually, when you write it down, you will not do it, because actually you don't really have a reason to think you will. You have this like hopes and dreams about yourself that tomorrow I'm going to be a completely different person, but you actually are not. But then even like and baby steps is something that I just keep telling people about and teaching all the time, because that's something that has helped me to change a lot of things in my life. But let's say somebody says like, I want to start reading. And I'm like, okay, can you read, I don't know, they would say like, I want to read like 20 pages a day. And I'm like, okay, when is the last time you read 20 pages a day? I don't know. Okay, maybe start with 1 page. It doesn't seem big, but you want to make it, and that's something that I have learned, is that you want to make it so small that it seems ridiculous not to do it. That even like, as you said about the gym, maybe for somebody showing up and doing the gym is a big challenge, but what if you set a goal just to show up and get in the gym? That's it. If you have a bad day, you just show up to the gym, you feel shitty, you leave. But what you do is that you actually build that habit to show up. And then you will show up enough times when you're like, well, I'm here, so I might as well do the workout,
Right.
But now we think that we built in that image in our minds that, oh, I not only have to show up, I actually have to be there for like at least, I don't know, let's say an hour or 2 hours, whatever, however long anybody's training, but let's say an hour. Now I have to go through pain for an hour. Then I have to be like super sweaty. It's really not cool, or I don't like it, whatever. And that's where actually we kind of make it hard for us to show up. But if your goal is just to show up, it doesn't matter if you do it for like, and maybe like, okay, first month, just show up. Next month, 5 minutes workout. And then it's at some point it will start to seem, it'll be such a strong habit that you won't even have to think about showing up, because it's part of you. It's part of what you do. And then once you show up, then you actually can focus on the hard bit, which is doing the workout or whatever. But yeah, it's these baby steps. They are, and that's something that I feel it's so hard to explain to people, because we want to have big change today. We feel bad with the way we are today. We don't like where we are, and we want to have change literally by tomorrow. I want to be a different person tomorrow. I don't want to be the person I am today. I want to be a different person. And that's why we set those big goals, because we want to have big change, because we don't really like where we are or who we are. But that's where we actually set ourselves up for like failure, because you probably know you won't do it, but we want to have that change. But and when I tell people, start small, like whatever you want to achieve, or whatever is the goal, or whatever you want to build, start small. If it's about like, let's say, a diet, eat 1 healthy meal a day. If all you eat is shit, start with 1 big, or like not big, but like 1 good meal. My words are messing up. So then you will do it enough times when you will start to get used to that thought. Or you might even have days when you're like, well, I actually feel good about this 1 good meal. I might as well have another one, and you start to entertain these thoughts that, oh, I might as well do this or that. But if you started with this expectation 7 days a week, no cheat meals, no slip ups, now you actually put so much pressure on yourself that it's really hard to actually perform or do whatever you set yourself to do. Because if I fail, that means that I'm this or that. I can't fail. And now and that's, I think, something with like universe as well. If you now focus on I can't fail, I can't fail, I can't fail, you'll make sure you fail.
Yeah, right.
It's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's a great point, Astra, of setting goals appropriately, for sure. Because you're right, we live in such a society of instant gratification now, and that's where that failure comes. Like, I want to lose 30 pounds tomorrow. I want to have 1 million followers tomorrow. It just doesn't happen that way. And so, yeah, you absolutely set yourself up for failure if you have to instantly have that. It takes time, it takes work. Again, going back to the process, the game plan is simple. It's the hard work that scares people off. But yeah, setting little goals each day, working your way into it. And that's why our programs through our app and things like that, they set people up so they can be consistent at it, and then can change that later to develop more good habits and more good habits. And then all of a sudden you're at that 30-pound weight loss and you're like, holy shit, I actually did it. And then it starts to click in your mind, like, okay, this is the recipe. Like, it might suck sometimes, but it's actually work, and it's through consistency and hard work where that comes to fruition, and it's
sustainable.
Exactly right. It's sustainable. And people tend to overlook that. Like you said, like, you just went through a massive holiday season, Christmas, you're with family, you're eating everything that's thrown your way. Then all of a sudden, January 1st, absolutely everything is gonna change. And it's overwhelming. It's hard. And the more you make it suck on yourself, the harder it's going to be to continue going forward. That's just the reality of it. But the amount of momentum you could build up, even from now, you got a little bit over a month until the first of the year. Do you know how much momentum you could build from now till the first of the year? You could get over that 2 or 3 week period phase of the soreness and all that lactic acid build up in your body, where you actually start to feel good. And then you can hit the new year with a head of steam.
And I think another thing is that, like, because you go through holidays, it doesn't mean that you can't really do any exercise or anything like that. You can still do something. It doesn't mean that now you're like cut off training for like 2 weeks or even like a month or whatever, and now you can start back again only when you have these like perfect conditions and there's no holidays coming up and you actually can focus on it. You still can show up and do whatever you have to do. But like, actually, one thing that I also wanted to say about the future self, it's something that when you said like it might be silly, it's actually not. It's something that I read. I think the book is called The Willpower Instinct. Great book. And in there, there was like really good explanation about the future self, where when we make decisions, if you now think about, let's say, doing the workout or not doing, eating healthy or not eating healthy, it's harder to make that decision when you think about yourself right now, because you're probably going to choose whatever you feel like or whatever you want, or based on your emotions. But if you now think about your future self, if I make that decision not to train today, tomorrow my future self will pay for it, and she will have to pay or like train harder or do this more or whatever. If I don't do this assignment tomorrow, I have to do 2 assignments or whatever. So now when you think about this future self, actually by whatever you do today, you take care of that future self tomorrow, where it's much easier for that person. And I think when I read it after that, I read that initial, I don't know, few weeks, I think when I would think about it, I would actually get much more done, because I would think that, wow, I'm actually making it easier for myself tomorrow or next week or next month by doing it today. And because it's really easy to postpone things and think that, oh, like, I'm probably going to feel more motivated to do it tomorrow. No, actually, you have to do it twice as much tomorrow. Technically, like you won't do like 5 workouts when you skip like 5 days in a row. But still, like, if you think about how much work you will have to put in now, and that's something that I have learned about habits as well, because I'm kind of like, I don't know, say crazy, more like obsessed with, also crazy based on most people, about like tracking stuff. And with my habits, every day I track my habits. And that was a big thing that I learned with my habits, is that first, the most important habit actually is to track your habits. Because if you don't track those habits, you can't really know what you did or didn't do. If you now do more workouts than you did last week, you might feel great about yourself, but at the same time be frustrated for not getting results or whatever that you expected to get. But if you look at the data, you actually did 2 workouts instead of 5 that you wanted to do. So you can't really complain for not getting results. But also, big thing that I learned is that you can't do 30 days of habits in one day. It's just not possible. You have to show up, you have to do it today. And that was actually a big lesson during the 75 hard as well. All you need to focus on is today. You can't finish 1 month or like 30 days of 75 days of 75 hard in one day. You just can't do it. All you have to focus on is today. Finish today, leave it, let it go, whatever, focus on next day. Well, you can't really let go of 75 hard because you don't do something, you start over. But like in general, you can get only 100% of the tasks done if you do them today. You can't do them for 1 week in advance. It's not possible. So that was a big lesson for me, that all you really can focus on or control really is today. And that's where you build those results, because we have this image of the peak of the mountain that we want to reach, but that you can't really reach it unless you start to take those steps. And then when you start to take those steps, if you take them long enough, you'll reach that goal. But you can't take them all in like 20 minutes or like 1 day. It's not possible. You have to take those small, boring steps every single day, and you have to stick to it. And again, if you stick to it long enough, you will get those results. But with instant gratification, now you can get everything. Want to watch a movie? You can watch it today. Even when you buy something, you can get it delivered today. You don't have to wait. Well, in my country, it's a bit longer probably, but like, let's say in US, it's like today. Or like when I was in UK, I order something, it's at my door today. You don't have to wait. And now we have this expectation that to get results, I don't have to wait. I want it today. I want to get it today, which makes sense. You have reason to think that way because we live in a world where you get everything today. But when it comes to results, when it comes to achievement, mastery, it's not something you achieve in a day or get in a day.
Yeah, right. And yeah, with that, choosing, you have to choose when things are going to be difficult, and that also adds to levels of difficulty. So if you choose the difficult today, it's going to make things tomorrow a lot less difficult. It's going to make things a week from now a lot less difficult. But if you put it off today, like you said, that's going to lead to 2 workouts tomorrow, 20 pages to read tomorrow. Like, so you're just compounding that. So choose your difficulty today.
Also, like you're compounding your difficulty as well, not only
100%. Plus, on top of that, you're adding the anxiety of not doing what you said you're going to do.
Yeah.
So when you work ahead, there's almost this weird sensation, like you're so far ahead, like you've got all your tasks completed for the next day, your calendar set for the next day, and you're like, holy shit, I have 3 hours this evening that I don't have to do anything. You almost get to this point where you're like, am I being lazy? Like, can I do something more? But the reality is you've taken care of everything you need to take care of to have yourself set up for success the next day. And it's a weird feeling, but it's ultimately a good feeling, as opposed to you've got 2 hours before you need to go to bed, but you still have 5 tasks that you've got to do. And like, there's no way I'm going to get this done. So you just decide to not do it. And then you roll into the next day and you're already starting the day behind. So there's that anxiety level. And then you still have these tasks to accomplish. You're not as far ahead as you should have been because you put it off. And so then that can lead to just continuing to not do it, or that Monday effect of I'll start next Monday. And that is the absolute killer of dreams and goals, because you're not just taking those baby steps. Because like you were saying, how do you climb a mountain, right? It's one step at a time. You're not just going to jump to the top. How do you eat an elephant? Is a good one. One bite at a time. It'll take time, but it can get done. by just taking those baby steps. And another thing I wrote down too, like talking about tracking your tasks, talking about tracking your food. While it seems simple, the reality is you can manage what you track, right? If you're not tracking it, how are you supposed to manage it, right? And it's a huge piece of success, you know.
Tracking
of
actually
tracking
gives you awareness
exactly
about the actual situation, not what you feel or think the situation is.
You're exactly right. So when you go and you look back on that prior week and you see, okay, here's where I won, here's what I did well, what can I do better this week, how can I make that even 1% better, you know? And so yeah, tracking's huge, but ultimately realizing and setting your standards to a level that you can reach, and then going on top of that, you know, Elon Musk talks about it a lot. Like, if you set your goals to, you know, yes, of course you want to set small daily goals, monthly goals, things like that you can reach. But so say you set a goal in 6 months, like you want to save, and you can make it a ridiculous amount. Say you want to save $100,000, or pounds or euros, whatever you guys use over there.
Oh, here's euros.
Okay. But you know, like, you might not reach that, but you can look back and say, okay, if I didn't set it to that point, you're going to be a hell of a lot closer now than you would have been not setting those goals, you know? So that doesn't mean you fail if you keep going. If you keep going, you cannot fail. You know what I mean? And you're going to certainly be a hell of a lot closer to those big outlandish goals. Like, I have ridiculous goals set out there that one day I will accomplish, but it takes doing daily things and keeping those small habits to get there, you know, because like Kobe Bryant, you know, he didn't win a national championship by just showing up to that game and winning right there. You know, he won that national championship by the hundreds of thousands of hours of showing up at 3 a.m. and shooting free throws every single day. That nobody was there following him, telling him to do that. That was him just showing up and going and doing it. And those hours of practice led him to winning that championship, you know, not just showing up to that game. Right. And I love your emphasis on the small baby steps, because in people's minds, when they think about it, it's like, what is 10 pages a day of reading a self-development book, right? Until you're 365 days into it, you're 3,650 pages in, you're 10 books deep, and you've read all these things, and now you have this knowledge that you're applying. You know, it's not just about reading, it's about applying that, you know. And that's why 10 pages is such a good place to start too, because you can actually focus. It doesn't take that much out of your day, but you can focus on those 10 pages and then apply what's in those 10 pages to your life. Like, you're actually absorbing and retaining that information. And, you know, like David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. Have you heard of David Goggins?
Oh, I have been listening to it several times already, so I kind of know all of it.
Yes, wonderful. And anybody should read that book. Wonderful book. But that led me into taking the steps of doing his 4x4x48 challenge.
Oh, how was that?
Excruciating. I'm not a runner. I've never prior to that, never in my life in one setting had I ran more than 1 mile. And that was in like high school PE. But the interesting part about this is, so I read about that challenge, which for anybody listening is 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight. So you end up ultimately accumulating running 48 miles in a 2-day span. And so I came in to work and talked to one of our executives, his name's Will Grumpke. He's a mentality savage. You know, he out here at HQ, it's a big building, and we've got concrete all around it, and one lap around it is half of a mile. So 2 laps equals 1
Hmm.
mile. So I don't know, 2.3 kilometers or something.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact translation, but regardless, he ran 200 laps around this in 19 hours. No
Wow.
headphones, no music, nothing. And so he just did that because he told himself he could do it. And so I came in and talked to him, and I was like, "Hey, I want to do this 4x4x48 challenge. I've never ran. I want to train a couple months and then do it." He's like, "Fuck that. This Friday, we're gonna do it. Just do it. Otherwise, you won't do it." It's just that simple. You won't do it. If you say you're gonna do it, you won't do it. And so that weekend, I just did it.
And you
And
hadn't done like any running or training or anything like that for running?
I trained the 3 days leading up to it. I ran 4 miles around this building each day coming
Yeah.
up to that. And so ended up doing it, accomplished it. There's a few periods, at the midnight or the 4 a.m. where, I would walk some of the 4 miles, just, my legs, my
Yeah.
body just wasn't built for it. But ultimately,
But your mind
I got
was.
it done. Yeah, that's the point, right? And so while it sucked, it was amazing. But just going back to what these simple, reading 10 pages a day can do for you. And the cool thing is a lot of times some of these books we find and pick out, like, you're going to get to 10 pages and be like, screw that, like, I want to keep reading, and it's just one of those things. And
Yeah, and actually,
but
like
it's
one thing that I wanted to say when you said 3,650 books, that's actually without counting in compound effect. That's only if you do 10 pages. Because
right.
like one thing that I saw within myself was that I felt like, okay, 10 pages, it's nothing. I'm just gonna read it. And then after a while, I just noticed I'm reading like 20, 30 or whatever, because you get so used to it. And like that calculation you made, that's even without compound effect. So if you add that, that's way more. And it's not
Right.
only pages, like pages probably something that at this point I'm not a fan of, because as you said, like it doesn't really matter how much you read, it matters how much you actually take action on what you have read. So
Yep.
even like when it comes to training or showing up or different habits, stuff like that, that's what actually counts. But the more you take these actions, the more results you will get. One last question before we close out that I wanted to ask you was about, you said that we don't like hard things, or we hate hard things, even like stronger emotion. Is there a way to love them?
Yeah, I think there really is, and that's by the results that come from going through those hard things. Because I'm so there was a point in time I hated I hated so many things in my life, like, I blame my ex-wife for everything. I was blaming families, friends, like, and going through those hard times, and then finally looking back and realizing where they have brought me to, and now what I'm doing with the hard things each and every day, and what it continues to paint this picture of the future, right? You have to live life for what's going to be coming, and so you start to compound these little wins and start seeing, like, your life getting better. Like, you might not see it each and every day, but 6 months later, when you look back to where you were 6 months ago, you're like, holy shit, like, your body's changed, your how you speak to people's changed, how you treat people's changed. And so knowing that you're avoiding discomfort later, because you're going to go through hard times no matter what.
Yeah.
But you can choose, like, you can set it up to when you go through those hard times. If you go through it now and set yourself up mentally and physically to take on hard things later, you're going to do so much better. You're going to accomplish so much more. And so I think the biggest thing of look, it's about perspective. Like, are these really hard things, or is this something that is going to make me better? Like,
Yeah.
I now look at the gym, like, that 4 a.m. till 8 a.m. slot where I wake up, go to the gym, like stretch, get feeling better, like get that momentum rolling for the day. And like even as simple as like hitting the sauna with my post workout shake and hitting the showers, best time of
Cold
the
plunge.
not yet. Someday. But the reality is that 4 o'clock a.m. to 8 a.m. slot is my favorite part of the day. And it used to be, I used to just hate it because I wasn't setting myself up to enjoy that. I was going to bed at 11 o'clock or midnight and only getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And then I'd, of course, wake up tired and groggy and feel like shit. But now that I look forward to that and I get to bed at a good time, I have all my tasks accomplished. You wake up free from anxiety. You've got a head full of steam and momentum rolling into that next day. You hit a good workout, and then for me personally, I get to start developing people. And if I'm at running at 100% and being my best self, I get to make the other people around me that much better. And then I get to talk. Occasionally now I get the opportunity to talk to people like yourself through our athlete search. And I get to make them better. I get to make their day better. I get to make their perspective of who First Form is better. So if I'm running at 100% capacity, I can make the world around me better. If you're in a room with me, you should leave that room a better, more accomplished person. And that's my goal every single day. And if I'm not being my best self, I cannot do that. And so you have to change the perspective in your mind that things are not hard. They're a means to an end to make your life better.
So is it like finding like purpose in suffering?
A little bit, yes. And like, yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Is like when you're in the middle of a hard set, you're like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
But then when you're done, you have that sense of accomplishment. That anxiety is wiped out. You have to realize that you're taking that little piece, even if you're not somebody that suffers from anxiety. No matter what, if you tell yourself you want to do something or you're going to do something and you don't do it, that is going to sit in the back of your mind. Whether you think it does or not, it's going to sit there. Like you said, if you don't do those squats that day, you're going to think about it the rest of the day. And that is wasted space in your mind when you can utilize that for absolutely something better and more productive, as opposed to thinking about that. Perfect example. Yesterday, I came into the gym 100% thinking it was like an active rest day. We're just going to stretch. We're going to do some mobility movement. And my partner comes in and was like, oh shit, today's density day, not active rest. And so density day is 100 reps of all your main focused muscle groups. And so literally in the middle of one of my sets, we were doing like glute bridges, trying to build up the tushy. And literally I was like 65 reps in. I was like, fuck this fucking sucks. Like I was so pissed off, but got it done. The rest of the day, I was so thankful to have pushed through all that hard part, because I knew I felt better throughout the rest of yesterday. I feel wonderful today about it. And so, yes, it's finding the purpose in suffering is a great way to look at it. But again, it's that switch in your mentality. You can't look at this as something hard. If you sit there and constantly think like this is going to suck, it's going to suck.
Yep.
But if you look at it like this is going to make me better, this is going to be awesome, I'm going to have fun with it, and you're telling yourself that in your mind, then it's going to come into fruition. You're going to be more comfortable going through it. You're going to push harder through it. If you say it's going to suck, you're going to go in and you're going to half-ass it anyways, and you're going to, at the end of it, you're like, oh, was that really worth it? Well, probably not if you didn't put in the effort needed for it. So I think it's a big perspective thing, honestly.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you mentioned fun, because that's something that a lot of times I think I'm still learning it, where even like with swims, I kind of love them at this point, even though I know it's gonna suck or feel like it sucks, but I love it. But even like with workouts, if I know that I'm gonna have like hard workout, like some time ago to be like, oh, this is going to be hard, or I don't feel like it, or whatever. Now I'm like, this will be fun,
Yeah.
especially on days when you don't feel like doing it. Those are the days where it actually counts the most, because that's where most people are like, I don't feel like it. They don't even show up. But you
Yep.
showing up, that by itself is a big step. And one thing that I learned from Jocko was that he said that when I have bad day, I actually make sure I make the workout harder. I do extra.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that I learned from him, that even like, I remember last year when I didn't feel like doing the workout, I was like, okay, today I'm going to do legs. Then I don't feel like doing swim at all. I don't want to do it. I'm gonna stay the longest I've stayed so far. and
Yes.
I would just go. And then when you go through those days and you show up, and not only show up, but actually, I don't want to say force yourself, but like in a way force yourself to go the extra mile. That's where you start to show yourself that actually I can perform and I can do much more on days when I don't feel like it. So now you don't really
Mhm.
have a reason not to do it, or to give excuses on a day when you don't feel like it. Oh, this is just a day when I do extra mile, or I do extra. This is just one
Yep.
of those days. But yeah, it's a really interesting concept that I learned, and probably I'm still learning. I wouldn't say I have mastered it, but looking at it as a fun, that's something that has been really big, like game changer for me, where I'm like, somebody says like, oh, this will be hard, like even about swims, I'm like, it'll be fun. Forget about hard, it's fun.
Yeah.
Because you can learn a lot
Yep.
about yourself. But yeah, I think I could talk to you and ask you so many questions, literally like forever, because this conversation is really fun, really interesting.
I agree.
But do you have anything that you would want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we covered, and Austria, to be honest, I would love to do this again, because yes, I could
Oh
talk to
yeah,
you
for
for
sure.
hours. But yeah, just stop making those excuses and justifications in your head. The other side of hard is the most rewarding lifestyle that you can live, not just for
Mm,
yourself, but for everybody. And don't mention it. Don't go on top of the world and announce it. Just do it. Just go
yeah,
and do it. And like we talked about earlier, it's those little wins, those little baby steps that are going to compound into something bigger. And it's going to feel better later. Do things now for your future self. Do
yeah,
things today for yourself tomorrow. You'll look back on yesterday and you'll
yeah,
say, thank you for doing that.
yeah.
Thank you
Even if it's a
for
small
going to
step.
work out. Exactly. Thank you. Thank yourself, and live that life without making excuses and justifications. Do the hard now so it's not harder tomorrow or harder next week. Just start. Show up. One of Grant Cardone's biggest things and all of his lessons he can teach is show up.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you with that.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Yes, I absolutely had a wonderful time. I can't believe it's already been 2 hours. That's mind blowing. But yeah, I would love to do it again. I'm so happy we got to meet. I'm so happy we got to take that athlete search call. And yeah, you never know what little things in life, what little steps are going to have. I was thinking about this the other night, like me choosing to be sober, talking to this person, listening to this podcast, leading me to St. Louis, leading me to where I was to be able to take a phone call with a girl in Latvia to lead me to this podcast. And for your decisions on your side of life to
Yeah.
lead you to having a podcast, to being here, to having me on your podcast, it's fucking insane.
Yeah. And
So
that's
be
literally
honest.
coming from taking action. That's all it is.
Right.
Just those small actions. Nothing more than
Exactly.
that. So
Yes.
wow, it was so much fun. Thank you for coming.
Of course, Austria.